Renai X Royale is a visual novel developed by ASa Project and got an official translation by Nekonyan in 2022. If the name ASa Project sounds familiar to you, that's because they're the ones that developed visual novels such as Sankaku Renai and Koikari, Love for Hire. With most visual novel quick recommendation videos I've made, I kept them quick mostly because it had been 5 to 10 years since I've read them. However, with Renai X Royale, I'm keeping it short because I purposely chose to only read a few routes, more on that in a little bit. Renai X Royale is very much a comedy-heavy romance and visual novel. A lot of the humor consists of the characters savagely roasting each other, acting stupid, and making a whole bunch of fourth wall breaking jokes, making fun of various anime and eroge romantic comedy tropes. The vast majority of the common route is full of this ridiculous over-the-top degenerate comedy. It emphasizes the game's title, which is a high school love harem battle royale. All of the main heroines are very openly in love with the main character and are willing to savagely make fun of each other and try to point out ways to one-up the other heroines to show how they're the perfect fit for the main character romantically. This doesn't even stop once you reach a heroine route. Right when the main character actually chooses to go out with someone, the other heroines start off very salty and try their last-ditch effort to hit on and get with the main character, but obviously to no avail. Almost every single line, you should just be expecting some really goofy, stupid, or over-the-top punchline, unique quirky humor, character traits, and plenty of sexual jokes. The only other thing worth pointing out about the setting is most of the main characters are part of the student council, but otherwise, Renai X Royale is a fairly standard high school moe slice of life. Though it is worth noting, the student council and harem battle royale thing reminded me of IX Shitel by Hooksoft. Despite the dialogue being at least 80% comedy, there's still a surprisingly kind of interesting depth around this premise. But the most interesting thing being that the main character actually had a couple previous romantic relationships before the story started. These provide some pretty interesting backstory that I wasn't expecting, in addition to the otherwise goofy romantic comedy. There's also some pretty surprising wholesome moments. The comedy is still the focus, and for the most part, don't expect this to be the deepest or most character development heavy romance story ever. Expect to be reading comedy for the vast majority of the time. You'll know if you'll like or dislike the comedy within the first 30 minutes of the visual novel. That could be a good indicator to see if you want to keep going or not. To quickly go over the main heroines, Mari is one of the funniest and stupidest childhood friend characters I've seen in a visual novel. This girl defines being loud and spontaneous, being very unpredictable, with her first scene of the whole VN confessing to the main character during class. This comedy continues in both the common and her route with some of the funniest sprite faces I've seen in visual novels, and two of the funniest H scenes I've read. That said, she does have some surprising depth as a childhood friend with her previous relationship with Hiro, the main character, being a focal point for hers and some other characters' melodrama. Shione is the student council president. However, she's defined by her pride in her appearance and being just as, if not dumber than Mari. She's also the lewdest character, at least in common route, with her having some funny and unexpected monologues and actions. Her pride and stupidity are balanced by her faithful maid Ao, who works to make sure Shione is always taken care of, while constantly roasting a lot of Shione's flaws publicly. Shione's route is mostly comedy, but has been a focus on her relationship between her and Ao. Nonoka is Hiro's pure-blood sister. She's constantly blunt, and quite honestly, kind of a bitch to just about every character besides herself. She's by far the most open to criticizing every other heroine for not being good enough for her brother, while obviously being thirsty for her brother herself. Personally, I didn't bother with Nonoka's route, because outside being funny occasionally, I shouldn't find her particularly likable, and I'm very rarely into incest routes. The only reason she wasn't my least favorite is she does have some legit motivations of wanting to protect her brother based on his past. Rena is a newer idol of a unit called Glorious Snow with Yuna, but generally considered not as popular. She was able to get to know the main protagonist before the story and likes to mischievously flirt with Hiro fairly often, while of course roasting the other love interests. I was not a fan of Rena and didn't do her route. The whole referring to herself in third person to be cute is a trope I never liked. I don't care for idol heroines. I could just not think of anything about her that would make me want to choose her over the other heroines besides completionism. I usually don't talk about sub or minor heroines, but Yuna is a very notable one in this visual novel, and one I was surprised wasn't a full-on main heroine. As said earlier, she is also an idol with Rena, but much more popular, with a pure feminine vibe and a coy, teasy way of talking to Hiro and just about everybody. What sticks out about her is she's the other character who had a past relationship with Hiro before the story, so that interests me even though I didn't care for idol heroines. Her route is a bit longer than most side routes I've read in visual novels, being about 50% of a main heroine route lengthwise instead of being like an hour at most. If you care about canon routes, I hear ASa Project's untranslated visual novel Futamata Renai confirms Yuna's the canon heroine, but up to you if that matters. There are a few other side routes, but I didn't bother reading them, so I won't talk about them. However, related to side characters, there is one minor thing I want to bring up. There are some localization choices some people complain about, but a particular one is that some people dislike the translation choice of various characters calling Yoshinori an incel. I'm guessing they did this because of his open fear and criticism of women. If you don't like or agree with this choice, there's an optional fan patch to change all instances of incel to loner, based on the original Japanese word used, inkya. Renai X Royale is one of those visual novels you should be able to figure out if you like within 30 minutes or so. If you do, I think you'll end up quite liking it, even if you only decide to do a few routes. This visual is all about its super goofy, degenerate, and over-the-top comedy, related to its high school love harem battle royale with a little bit of wholesomeness. If you have any questions about Renai X Royale or this video, feel free to leave a comment below.